Kate is she's an associate professor in wearable and mobile technology at OCAD University in Toronto, but her stomping ground is here in New York. And in fact, to establish her city cred, some of her work, her work on the Botanicals project, is actually here in MoMA, Museum of Modern Art here. So even if she's in Toronto, she's still made her mark on New York, and you know, we'll maintain her residence here. So, Kate Hartman, author of Make Wearable Electronics, and you can read along. She'll just be reading from the book. No, just kidding. Hey.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. Hi, friends. Nice to see you guys. I'm really happy to be here. It's nice to have excuses to come back to New York. And I have to say, for those of you who are in this room earlier today and early this afternoon, like, there's just been some really phenomenal talks going on, and I'm all revved up and inspired. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. So yeah, my name's Kate. I'm here to talk about what's next for wearables. I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do, and then also just some stuff I've been thinking about since I spent a bit of time writing about wearable electronics. So whenever I talk about this stuff, I like to just address the question, why wearables? And I think this is an important point of clarification because I work in wearable technology and wearable electronics. People often perceive me as an evangelist, you know, like that, like, oh, everything needs to be wearable, and that's not the place that I'm coming from. I think wearables are a really interesting space to work in because it all surrounds this area. So our bodies, you know, so everybody has a body, and it's kind of our primary interface to the world. And, you know, the reason why I think bodies matter is because they are, you know, they are part of this interface, and, you know, we kind of have this area of this like layer of perceptual fact. So basically, a lot of the things that we wear are really personal, and they start to feel like a part of ourselves. And, you know, they actually can start to become a part of our, you know, lived experience and a part of our sense of identity. So in terms of working in the interactive space, I think the wearables, you know, are a really sort of charged area to work in. So I'm really interested in devices that affect the ways in which we relate to ourselves, and I'm also interested in devices that affect the ways in which we relate to each other. So in terms of what I do, so as Brian mentioned, I'm an associate professor at OCAD University in Toronto. So I am part of the Digital Futures program, which is situated within the context of an art and design university. I'm also the director of the Social Body Lab, which I'll tell you more about. And I moonlight as the undirector for ITP Camp, which happens here in New York City in Manhattan at ITP NYU, which is an awesome summer program. It's a summer camp for grown-ups, so not kids, for you guys. So if you're ever looking for a space to make and create in June, I recommend that you come on down. So the Social Body Lab is, it's basically a team devoted to body-centric technologies in the social context. So I get the benefit of working with students from a variety of disciplines, from textiles and industrial design, integrated media, drawing and painting, and all kinds of different disciplines in terms of thinking about what's going on with body-centric technologies. So within the work that we do everything from wireless wearables to social prosthetics and fashionable technologies. So I'll tell you about a few of our projects. So the first one's called Nudgeables. So this is a project that is designed around interactions that happen in the context of a room. Say, for instance, this room. So when you're in a room with a bunch of people, there's lots of different layers of communication that, you know, are transpiring. So one layer might be, for example, you know, I'm talking and you guys are listening. But at the same time, you may have, you know, communications coming in through your various devices, like email or text messages, that sort of thing. Or else you may be having, you know, a personal exchange with someone else in the room. Like I may say something ridiculous, and you may, you know, kind of poke the person next to you or say something, or if it reminds you of something. But point being, there's always these different layers of communication. So in the cocktail party example, you may be talking to one person, but then you might be actually, sort of having another level of communication with the person across the room. So if you're stuck in a really ridiculous conversation that you don't want to be in, you may give your friend or your partner the look, right? And try to get them to come rescue you. So, so for this purpose, we designed a kit called the Nudgeables Accessory Kit. And so this is a kit that's designed for designers. So this is hardware that's meant to allow people to actually focus on the design of some pieces of wearable technology as opposed to the technological development. And so it's really kind of plug and play. So rather than getting wrapped up in complex circuit design and radio configurations, you can actually focus on application and integration. So how are you going to use it, and what is the desired context? So what was neat about this is we were able to, so the way it works is basically, it's just two paired devices, and when you close a switch on one end, it vibrates a motor at the other end, and you can swap out other, sensors and actuators, but it was just meant to establish this really baseline communication. And so we're able to put these in the hands of different designers and see what they were going to do with them. And so what was interesting about this was actually seeing that the things that resulted look like clothes. So this is an interesting point. When you show it on screen, it's like, oh, like there's a t-shirt, great. But this is a t-shirt that you can use to nudge your friend from across the room. So for instance, this has a conductive fabric patch on the shirt, and when you touch the pendant to the shirt, it sends a message. This button-down shirt has a sender, embedded in the cuff of the sleeve of the shirt. This necklace, something similar. Your belt buckle. These socks are for dance parties. So while you're busting a move, you can kind of touch your feet together, and that sends a message. Or even, a simple business tie. So while this is really, kind of in some ways underwhelming to look at, I think it's really interesting to think about, how technology can be embedded in the things that we actually wear, and how technology is worked with from like a fashion designer's perspective, when it's not meant for show or for communication in a more visual sense, when it's meant to just be part of your lived experience. Like, how can the technology disappear into the clothing? Along those lines, another project that we worked on is called the Vega Edge. And so this was working with a fashion designer who does a lot of illumination in clothing for cyclists and for fashion needs. And so she had been designing all these beautiful coats, really lovely custom designed coats. But she wanted to develop something that was a bit more accessible, because for the average person buying a custom designed fashion coat is a bit out of their price range. So we worked with her on developing a smaller, more affordable modular item. And so we were able to bring to the table a lot of different prototyping techniques, laser cutting, 3D printing, different material approaches, that sort of thing. And we sort of started to get into the idea of working with something that would clip to the edge of your clothing. So you wouldn't have to have an entirely electronic garment. You would just have an electronic accessory, but one that would look okay when it was off. And so we ended up with a design that looked like this. And we're really interested in this idea of the off value, so that it doesn't look like a piece of gadget when it's being worn and not being used. So it consisted of laser cut leather, some light boards, and then the light boards are inserted into the leather closure, and it uses magnets so that you can attach it to any piece of clothing. So, something like this. So they're really nice to wear because they can just snap to anything. So it goes on your shirt, you can put it on your pants, anything you want. You can do like a nice little kick with it. You guys are really quiet. What's up with that? You can laugh. Things are funny. Thank you. Like I'm alone in here. So anyway, so it's really nice because it kind of like they blend. They're made of leather. We also had a vegan leather option. And they can clip to any clothing. And so anyway, it's just something that's meant to kind of disappear. Like a lot of these are kind of what I call chameleon projects. Like they just disappear into your life and they just kind of work. So anyway, we did a little Kickstarter campaign for them and did a full production run, and we shipped about 600 of them in August. So now they're like out in the world and people are wearing them while they're riding their bicycles and going to exotic nights out on the town. And also there's one guy who is a competitive speed skater. and he wears it on his hat so that his friends can see, which one is him. So I thought that was kind of cool. So anyway, we go from like communications into fashion, and my personal work is a bit on the wackier side. I like to make hats that are about the voices in your head, and suits that allow you to communicate with glaciers. So just to put that out there. So anyway, I've started to finally be able to pull my lab into some of this, which makes me feel better about life. We got a nice call from an anthropologist at Intel Research who approached us about a project called the Prosthetic Technologies of Being. And she was like, I've been doing this research about wearables feeling like an extension of self. Do you think you guys would want to make something in this space? And we were like, yeah. So it's been a really fun project. It's still mid-process. But in terms of extending the self, one direction we went in was kind of like a very physical extension. So how we could like amplify and contract our physical form based off of just basic body movement. So to do that, we started working with EMG, which is electromyography. So EMG sensors, so sensing the muscle movement. And using those sensors to control like a basic servo motor. So moving on from there, we started playing with different pleating techniques. So coming from like a fashion perspective, one way to allow things to expand and contract is through pleating. So we're like, okay, pleating and folding. And we eventually developed kind of like a special way that we like to create textiles that could do that. And so then from there, we kind of put it all together and started making these wearables that could expand or contract based off of your subtle body movements. So this one, when you shrug your shoulders, the hood will go up, and when you shrug them again, it will go back down. So this one is using some sensors on the back of the neck. From there, we moved on to actually using sensors on the arm for the bicep. And so from there, we started to, we took some inspiration from like shoulder pads and just kind of like the shoulders as being, like an area of power and communication. And so we developed this prototype, which is called Monarch. Which turned out to be a heck of a lot of fun. And, so we've been doing a lot of experiments. So we made one, and it got kind of addictive. So we made about 4 more of them and did a small user testing session just to see what people thought of them. Because we're like, this is weird, but really fun. And, the whole point with making wearables, for me, is to have people wear them. So, in order to do that, you have to have multiples and that sort of thing. So anyway, then we want to see like, okay, did people feel like this was an extension of self? Like, did this feel like a part of them? And so one of the questions from our survey that we got some nice answers to was just to circle one of these pairs of circles in terms of how you felt like what was your relationship with the device. And so I was happy to see that that second to last one had 10 people who felt like, it felt almost like a part of them. And I felt like for our first go at it, that was pretty good. And so, but it was really neat because people didn't want to take them off. Like at first they felt a little awkward. They're like, oh, I've got wings on my shoulders. But then after that, they got really attached. And so when we would be like, okay, we're moving on to the survey portion, they'd be like, oh, do we have to take it off? And the thing we didn't expect is they were also like, can we take some pictures of ourselves? And so we started working like a selfie time into the schedule. But anyway, we're moving on with this project and starting to look at, I love this personally. I think it's awesome and like really expressive. And, people use it to like punctuate their speech. They use it to, express emotion. We've got different modes, so some of it's like how hard you flex your muscles, depends on how much they go up. There's also like a clap on, clap off mode where it goes up, it goes down, depending on when you flex. But anyway, we're also interested in how this could integrate more into everyday life, because these are kind of these very large objects. And so we're working on a smaller version, actually a much smaller version that will actually be able to be incorporated into everyday clothing. So we're interested to see how this sort of mechanism behaves in that context. My last recent big project was this puppy. So this is my first time writing a book, so I'm really excited that you guys have it in your hands. I hope you like it. But yeah, so this is a book about wearable electronics. Specifically, it's about how we can effectively embed interactive systems in things that live on the body. And so there's a lot of great books in this area, but for me, this is just a summary of my findings and teachings from the last sort of 6 or 7 years teaching in this space. And it's been really interesting as of late because there's been all these kind of emerging platforms to work with in order to do this. So yeah, so one of the things I've been noticing as I've been working in this space is that we're at a moment when wearables aren't so weird. You know, like when I first started working on this stuff, I told people I worked in wearable electronics, they were like, what? You know, it's kind of this like, weird, I don't know. But now my parents understand what I do, which is always very reassuring. At least for them. And so yeah, so it's been interesting to see these products and devices come more into the public sphere and become a bit more of a lived reality. And so it's got me thinking from a variety of perspectives, both as a professor and teacher who teaches in this area, also someone like writing a bunch of instructions on how to work with this stuff, as well as someone working with a lot of partners and doing collaboration, just kind of about like what's next. Like we've kind of hit some milestones in the last 2 years, but I'm really interested in what's next, not just in terms of the technical, but also the conceptual and the contextual, right? So it's not just can we do it, can we stick this computing capability in this space, but what's the idea and where does it play out and why do we care? And do we actually want to live that experience? So I've been paying a lot of attention to the kind of peaks and valleys of development in the wearable space. And so 2 really active areas have presented themselves. One is this area of electronic textile toolkits. So when the LilyPad came out, it was a really big deal. For those of you who don't know, the LilyPad is a series of circuit boards that were designed in a new way such that the connections were put along the perimeter so that you could sew electrical connections with conductive thread. And so basically this was a platform that was saying you can make a circuit by sewing. And it set a precedent for a bunch of other toolkits that followed, and they've all been improving and adding new things and new features, and that's really cool. And it opened up a new way of thinking about electronics as not being something hard that lives in a box, but something that could be soft and sort of work with the curves and nuances of the human form. So that's really cool. The other thing that we've seen is the emergence of a lot of these products. And so, this is really awesome because it used to be that, wearable technology was just a thing of science fiction, right? And now there are all these different devices that are out there. But, at the moment, despite a lot of the accomplishments, it feels like we're sort of still smearing aspects of our mobile phones on different parts of our body. And, it's cool. And there's great reasons to put devices on our faces and on our arms. But there's a lot more of us to be contended with. So I'm really interested in that. But I guess the main thing I'm interested in is kind of the gap between these 2 areas of development. So as a teacher and as a maker and as an artist and designer, I'm really interested in pulling people into this dialogue of where should wearables go, what do you want to wear, why, how, and when not. So I'm just curious about what new tools we need to make to bring people into a space where they can actually start to get involved in the bigger conversation beyond, handmade textiles into things that might actually travel into the consumer product realm. So overall, I'm just curious about what's missing. I think this is something that maybe you should think about. Also, what's next? And then ultimately, what makes something wearable? Not just how can you strap it to your body, but what makes you want to wear something in your real life? And I was sitting next to a guy on the plane last night, and the flight attendant was like, "Sir, what's that thing on your wrist that's blinking?" And he's like, "Oh, it's my pedometer." And so I was asking him, I was like, "Oh, do you like it?" And he's like, I got it because I wanted to be motivated to be better, and it just makes me feel bad about myself. And I thought that was really interesting. So overall, the way I would contextualize it, it's just how do we want to live with technology, and how do we want technology to live on and in us? because that's a pretty big deal, and I think it's worth thinking about critically and creatively. Thanks.